Alright guys, currently reporting from San Dimas, California. This whole city is where I grew up when I started delivering pizzas and playing 1-3, so it just feels kind of funny to be here talking about what we're going to talk about today, which is a $750,000 pot. I'm not going to pretend there's no spoilers. You guys saw the thumbnail and the title. However, it's not just going to be that, because I'm going to be covering 2 sessions from last week. I played Wednesday and Friday on Hustler Casino Live. Without any further ado, let's start off with Wednesday, which I believe was a 25, 50, 100. Not entirely sure. Anyway, there's going to be poker. Let's go. Alright guys, here we are underway playing some 25, 50, 100. I sit with $100,000, and in the first interesting hand, I get ace queen suited first to act, raise it up to 300, get a couple of callers before Dentist Dave makes it 1,000 from the big blind. A pretty small raise considering he's out of position and there's plenty of callers. So with ace queen suited, I think it's probably better to just raise again. I don't really want to call and let in the players behind me. So that's what I do. I make it 3,000 to go. The players behind me do get out of the way, but Dentist Dave makes the call. So we're going to go heads up in position to an amazing flop. King Jack 10 Rainbow, giving me what they call the nuts. The best possible hand with a straight. Dentist Dave checks. I continue with a bet of $3,000, and he makes the call, which is good news to me. Turn card is the deuce of diamonds. A nice turn should change absolutely nothing. This time when Dentist Dave checks, I'm going to continue betting for value. It is not some advanced science here. I've got a good hand. I want to bet it. $12,000 is the price now, and I'm happy to see that once again, Dentist Dave makes the call. So I'm looking for a clean river card to try to get some more value on, but that's not what we get. It's the queen of diamonds, which obviously makes it so that any ace or a 9 is now a straight. And also there are some flush possibilities with backdoor diamonds, but those are probably not too likely unless he flopped a pair and a backdoor flush draw. Anyway, it doesn't make too much difference because Dentist Dave only has $24,000 remaining, which of course is a lot of money, but not much compared to the size of the pot. So this time when he checks it to me, I decide to move all in. He tells me he's got 2 pair, but makes the discipline lay down at this point in the hand. Nice fold from the dentist, but we still end up winning around $18,000 to start the night. Next, this hand goes down where a bunch of players limp in, and I look down at Jack 10 suited in the big blind. Could go either way here between completing into the straddle or raising it up. I decide to raise. I make it $900 to go, and then Nick Airball in the third blind squeezes to $3,000. Everyone folds, but when it gets back to me, I've got a really good suited connector. Being out of position isn't great, but we're playing pretty deep, so if I make a good hand, could potentially win a lot of money against Nick if he's got something. Or, even if he's bluffing, which I've heard this guy does from time to time. So I make the call, and we go heads up to a flop of Queen 8-3 with 1 club. So we flopped a gut shot to the nuts and a backdoor flush draw. Not much else aside from that, though. I check, and he now bets $2,000. I'm obviously not going anywhere just yet for that price, so it's a question between check raising or just calling. And on a board like this, given the pre-flop action, I think it would be kind of tough for me to have really good hands. Maybe pocket 8s once in a while, and almost never would I have pocket queens because I probably would have raised again with that hand pre-flop. So considering that I don't have a lot of value hands, not really sure if it makes a ton of sense to raise a bluff either. So I decided to just call for those reasons. Again, not entirely confident if that makes sense, but that was my read in the moment. Turn card is really interesting. The king of clubs, giving me a bunch more outs. I've now got an open-ended straight draw and a flush draw. But at the same time, this is a card that should be a lot better for him than it is for me. He's going to have hands like pocket kings, king queen, ace king, aces, etc. You guys get the idea. Whereas I would never really have those hands too often. So when I check it over to him and he bets $5,500, only around half pot, giving me almost direct odds to call. And of course, plenty of implied odds if I were to hit my hand and he does have something. I am, of course, not done with the hand at all just yet, but once again, check raising doesn't seem to make a bunch of sense for the reasons I just listed. So I decided to call again. It's not exactly ideal to check call out of position with a draw, but in this exact scenario, I think it makes sense. Of course, I wish I had check raised at some point in the hand because the river comes the 9 of spades, giving me the very disguised nuts. This is pretty much the only way I would ever have Jack 10 suited in this spot is with the Jack 10 of clubs. So I check it over to him, fingers crossed that he continues blasting, whether he's got a good hand or a bad one. But sadly, Nick has rivered a pair. As you guys can see, he's got 9-7 of hearts. And maybe that's just enough for him to wave the white flag because he checks it back. And of course, we end up winning, but not as much as I had hoped. And with that, we move to the last interesting hand of this particular stream. In this one, Pepe opens to 300, and then Lawrence makes it 1200 from the small blind. I'm in the third blind with ace-3 offsuit, a pretty bad hand, and I think the best play here is to fold like 90% of the time, but once in a while get in there with a re-raise. We've got a small ace, not even suited, but we do have some removal to strong hands, and I haven't been playing too many pots today, mostly because I've been card dead, but at least it makes it look like I'm a tight player, and I feel like Lawrence might give me some credit. So, all that being said, I raise it up to $4,000. Pepe folds, and when it gets back to Lawrence, he doesn't care at all about how many hands I've played today because he raises again, this time to 8,000. Thing is, I made it 4,000. Now he makes it 8,000. That's called a min raise. I mean, technically speaking, he could have made it a little bit less. But point is, I am not going to fold for merely 4,000 more in a pot that already has 12,000 in it. I've got position. I've got an ace. Let's see what happens. Off to a flop, which comes ace 6-6. So if we were up against a hand like kings, queens, or jacks, we obviously pull ahead now. And if we're up against ace, king, or pocket aces, we're going to be in some trouble. That's kind of the nature of playing shitty aces like these. Lawrence checks, and I decide to check it back. Not really sure if there's any value in betting. Turn card is really good news. The ace of diamonds. Of course, we now chop with any better ace, and not only that, it makes it less likely that I've got an ace myself. I'm hoping my hand looks something like pocket tens, pocket nines to Lawrence, since I did check back on the flop, and it seems maybe he does think that because he now bets $10,000. Now we're in a spot where calling is going to look really strong, raising is going to look really strong. It's kind of impossible to disguise that I've got at least a decent hand. And for that reason, I actually contemplated a min raise here from 10,000 to 20,000 in hopes that to Lawrence, it would look like I'm trying to buy a cheap river with a hand like pocket jacks, for example. However, I end up deciding against it, although looking back, I still don't hate the idea, and just call. River is the deuce of spades, and now Lawrence checks. Of course, I will be betting, but it's a question of how much. And I think the answer is I should be betting pretty big because I'm representing either a full house or nothing at all. Occasionally, I might be going for some value with a hand like queens, but not too often. So, yeah, being that I'm representing either air or a strong hand, I think a pot-sized bet makes some sense. Trying to put Lawrence in a tough spot with a hand exactly like what he's got, but it seems to not put him in a tough spot at all because he folds in like 1 or 2 seconds. Unfortunate to not get the maximum, but once again, can't complain about winning versus kings when you have ace-3 offsuit. All right, and that brings us to the main event of the day, which is this 100-200 stream that we played a couple of days later. This is High Stakes Friday at Hustler. Once again, I sit with $100,000, and here we go. In the first fun hand, there's an open from Yang to 600, and I'm in late position looking down at Queen 8 suited. Not really strong enough to call, I think, so better play is probably just let it go most of the time and occasionally get frisky with it. This time, I'm getting frisky with it. I make it 2,600 to go, and then Rampage looks down at pocket queens in the small blind. More often than not, he's going to have the best hand, like he does here, so I don't blame him for raising once again. He makes it 8,000 to go. Yang releases his pocket nines, and now I've got a decision with Queen 8 suited. To be honest, I don't think it's much of a decision. This is a very clear fold. It's not a very great hand to continue with. Probably best to do that with something like 8-7 suited or even 8-6 suited. Queen 8 suited, not going to do very well against Rampage in this situation, but I want to get in there with my vlogger buddy. Maybe we play a big pot. Maybe I crack his overpair. Maybe something good happens, you know? I got some gamble, and I've been running kind of hot against him lately. I feel like I owe him some money back, worst case scenario. So I do make the call, and we go to a flop of Jack, 10, 3, 2 hearts. Not even a club out there, so pretty pathetic flop for my exact hand. We do have a gut shot. If a 9 comes, that'll give me a straight. But even at that, sometimes you'll have king, queen. So, yeah, not exactly the best flop. But I didn't play Queen 8 suited just to fold if I flop something. And a gut shot qualifies as something to me. So when he bets $16,000, I decide to call and see what happens on the turn. Could potentially bluff certain runouts too, although, again, I don't think I have the best hand to do that with. Turn card's interesting. It's the king of diamonds, giving me an open-ended straight draw now. But honestly, I think I'm just done with it at this point, expecting him to bet for sure on this card. But surprisingly, he does not. He checks it. Of course, I've got queen high, so it begs the question, should I start bluffing? And while I wouldn't blame you for saying yes, this isn't exactly a board or a situation in which I would expect Rampage to check the turn and then fold to a bet. I think it's very likely he's doing this with a hand that wants to pot control but continue. So I decided to just check it back and take the free card, which is an interesting one. It's the ace of diamonds, putting a backdoor flush draw out there and, of course, giving me the straight. Unless we're up against a flush, we're going to have the best hand, or maybe chopping. So when Rampage bets small, $12,000, I'm just going to go ahead and rip it all in there. He's got $60,000 behind. And if we can get called by a set or two pair, that would be excellent. If we could miraculously get him to fold a queen himself in fear of me having a flush, that would be an awesome result. But in the end, he ends up thinking it over for a while before calling with his pocket queens, which of course, I don't think he was ever going to fold. So yeah, we end up playing a nearly $200,000 pot against Rampage Poker, but it's a chop. Anticlimactic, but worth mentioning. In this one, there's a call from early position. Dentist Dave makes it 600, and I look down at pocket queens next to act. Of course, worth raising. If I'm going to be doing it with queen 8 suited, I will be doing it with queens. I make it 2,600 once again. Everyone folds, but when it gets back to Dentist Dave, he does not fold. Instead, he raises one more time, $5,000 additional dollars up to 7,600. Now it's on me, and I've got position. I am, of course, not going anywhere just yet with a hand like queens against a wild dentist. So I make the call, and we go heads up to a flop, which looks pretty good, 10-10 deuce. So if he's got like pocket jacks or pocket nines, some value hands he might play this way pre-flop, we are still ahead. And of course, if he's got some sort of bluff like ace king, ace queen, ace jack, you guys get the idea, we are still ahead. Interestingly enough, Dave decides to check, and I think you can go either way here between checking back or betting, but I certainly prefer betting small, so that's what I decide to do. $4,000, right around a quarter pot. Dentist Dave calls, which is not too concerning. I feel like he would still be doing this with ace high or maybe some smaller pocket pairs, but of course sometimes we will be behind hands like aces, kings, and the occasional ace 10 suited. Turn card is the 5 of diamonds, shouldn't really change anything. Once again, the dentist checks it over to me, and now we do have a question between checking back and trying to get to showdown on the river, or betting. On one hand, I don't really know if we're going to get called by a worse hand multiple times, at least not in this exact situation. But on the other hand, I would certainly have bluffs like suited connectors or just a bunch of other stuff that probably tries to pick up this pot. With that in mind, I do think betting is a little bit better, so I decide to bet half pot, $12,000. And unfortunately, it instantly backfires as Dentist Dave check raises all in for my remaining $63,000. Tough spot. We're getting a pretty good price to call, and he might even be doing this with a worse hand like pocket jacks, pocket nines, maybe even the occasional ace king that Dentist Dave just loses his mind with. Not too often, I will admit. That's probably not going to be too often, but often enough that I could probably sprinkle it into consideration from time to time. Now, as for myself, I could have some better hands to call with, like aces, kings, or any 10, but I could also have some bluffs that I could fold right away. So with queens, we're kind of like in the middle, not really sure which way to go with queens. And that's when it comes down to who you're playing against. Dentist Dave is someone who's given me plenty of action before. I know he occasionally likes to go for it, and if I end up giving some back in this situation, I think that's more than okay. So that's what I'm thinking about when I say, if you got it, Dentist Dave. You deserve this. I make the call. Maybe we're ahead. Probably not, but I make the call. Pot is now nearly $175,000, and Dave turns over the bad news. Pocket aces. So that was my worst fear, but something that I thought might be possible. We decide to run it twice. No queen for me, unfortunately, and just like that, we are stuck a bunch of money, $100,000 in the hole early on in this high-stakes Friday session. But hey, it couldn't have gone to a nicer guy, at least. However, the show goes on. I reload for another $150,000, and we are underway. In this next hand, we are once again going to battle against Dentist Dave. There's a $400 straddle on in this hand. Yang opens to $1,400, and then Dentist Dave makes it $3,400 on the button. I'm next to act in the small blind looking down at ace king. powerful cards, so I'm going to put in a powerful looking raise. I make it $9,000 to go. Yank folds, but Dentist Dave makes the call. Can't blame him. He's got a suited queen on the button. Heads up to a flop of 7-7-4 with 2 spades. Not much going on for me, but I could still have a bunch of hands that want to bet flops like this, including aces, kings, you know, the good stuff. So I do decide to bet small, $5,500. And Dentist Dave makes the call. Now, as you guys can see, he's flopped nothing, so I suspect he was doing this with plans of stealing the pot later on. Let's see what happens. Turn card is interesting. It's the 4 of clubs, a complete brick. If I had overpairs, I would continue betting, maybe occasionally check them, but mostly be betting them. So with ace king, I decide to rep like I've got one of those. $12,000 this time. Unfortunately, Dentist Dave makes the call one more time. So at this point, I feel like he's got an overpair for sure. Maybe not one that he's very confident about. Perhaps pocket 8s, pocket 9s, you know, things in that vicinity. So I'm looking for a good river card to try to bluff him off of those. The 3 of diamonds is not what I was hoping for. I don't think he's going to fold an overpair at this point. Maybe if I bet freaking massive, like $100,000, he might consider it, but I decided to just wave the white flag and check it. Could also have some showdown value against missed spades, which, you know, he could have since there was 2 spades on the flop. However, when he checks it back, I suspect most likely he instead has a pocket pair, which was what I was afraid of. But it turns out ace king is good somehow. Dentist Dave decides not to pull the trigger on the river, which of course I'm quite happy with, considering that I most likely would have folded. Perhaps he was taking some pity on me after the previous hand, but either way, we take this one down and are treading back in the right direction. In this one, the straddle is on once again to $400. Dentist Dave again in the mix. He raises to $1,200, and I'm next to act looking down at King 7 suited. Good candidate to occasionally re-raise with, I think, so I make it $4,000 to go. Sadly, action gets to Dario in the big blind, and he rips it in there with pocket aces. Can't blame the guy. Unfortunately, though, he's only got $10,000, and I already put in $4,000, meaning I'm getting a price to call with almost any 2 cards. And even if I wasn't, how do you not give a guy like this some action, you know? I make the call and see the bad news. We are up against pocket aces. Insult to injury is we decide to run it twice. On the first board, we make trip 7s, but no good against his top full house. And on the second board, we can't get any help either. So just like that, we are going to give Dario a warm welcome to Hustler Casino Live with a nice double up. Nice hand, man. Now, this next hand is going to look like some deja vu, but again, the straddle is on. Dentist Dave opens the same hand, King Jack offsuit, to $1,200, and I'm next to act with a hand I want to play, Ace 10 offsuit. Once again, I raise it up. I make it $4,400 to go. Don't really want to just call with Ace 10 offsuit. It's not really that strong, and if someone behind me squeezes, it's going to suck. So probably better to fold it or raise, so I do raise. Han makes the cold call in the big blind with pocket 8s, and Dentist Dave calls as well. So we go 3 ways to a flop of 3, 5, 6, rainbow. Not exactly the board I had in mind, so when it checks to me, I decide to check it back. Would even be doing this with overpairs at a high frequency, I think, because, you know, this is just a scary board. They could have sets, and I really would never have a set. So I decided to check it back, and we get some help on the turn. It's the 10 of diamonds, giving me a very disguised top pair, top kicker, I think. Interestingly, though, Han decides to lead out with his pocket 10s. 5,300 into the middle. Dentist Dave gets out of the way, but of course I am going nowhere with my top pair. I make the call, and we get a decent river card. It's the 3 of diamonds. So if we were up against a hand like 6-5 suited, for example, we now improve to beating that hand. But it does put in a backdoor flush draw, and I think sometimes he would be betting a flush draw on the turn, which of course now gets there. I do have the ace of diamonds, though, which kind of makes that a little less likely. I don't know. There's a lot going on. But Han ends up checking. Once he does that, I feel like he's got a hand exactly like the one he's got. Some sort of middle strength pair that was hoping to bet for protection on the turn and now doesn't really think can get any more value. Of course, I am not going to be checking back what I expect is the best hand almost always. So I'm going to be putting in a bet. Question is how big to bet, and I feel like what makes the most sense is a small bet since I would almost never be bluffing in this situation. But at the same time, Han doesn't seem like a guy who gives a shit about that kind of stuff. He's probably just going to call if he wants to get to showdown. So looking back, I wish I would have bet a little bit bigger. But anyway, I put in $9,000 and he makes the snap call. We end up winning against his pocket 8s. Lucky turn card for me. Going to win another pot and things are looking better, slowly getting out of the hole. And with that, we move to a very interesting spot, I think. In this one, the straddle is on once again. I believe at this point, we just had it on permanently. Dentist Dave opens to $1,000 in late position with ace-jack suited, and I am next to act on the button with pocket queens. Now, of course, pocket queens, time to re-raise, right? I don't disagree with that. But I think once in a very blue moon, it's a good idea to just call with hands like these so that if someone decides to squeeze behind, you can come in for a potential back raise or even just call again and continue to disguise the strength of your hand. I feel like doing this is a good idea so that when you do call raises, it doesn't necessarily mean you're weak all the time. It makes it a little tougher to play against people who have this in their arsenal. So this is going to be one of those times. I decided to just flat call on the button with queens. Double M calls in the small blind. Rampage calls in the big blind. And now Han's got a hand that he does want to squeeze with ace, jack, offsuit. And I don't blame him. There was a raise from late position, a call from the button. The blind's also called. So yeah, ace, jack is going to be a pretty good hand in spots like that. Unfortunately for him, I've actually got something pretty damn strong laying in the weeds. He makes it $7,400, and Dentist Dave calls the additional $6,400. So now there's already $18,000 in the pot, and action is back to me. Could make the case for calling again, but I feel like just springing the trap is probably best right here, right now. Han has been having a rough night, and I don't think he's looking to fold, especially when it looks like I could be getting out of line since, like I said, I just called pre-flop. So I decided to make it $27,000 to go. The blinds get out of the way, but Han does not fold. He starts thinking about it for quite a while. A couple of minutes go by. He counts his stack a few times. Realizes he started the hand with around $130,000, so plenty of chips remaining, and I feel like all options for him don't look too exciting. There's merit to calling, merit to jamming all in, and even folding seems completely reasonable since my hand looks pretty strong at this point. But in the end, Han decides he is sick of it all and announces all in for $120,000. Dentist Dave now gets out of the way, and of course, I make the snap call. If he's got aces or kings, so be it. But when I played pocket queens this way, I knew this was always a possibility, and if I'm beat, so be it. I'm in there. Pot is $247,000, nearly $250,000. I turn over the queens, and Han doesn't look too happy, so that's somewhat a relief. We decide to run it twice. First board comes king high, which honestly doesn't scare me too much because if he had a hand like ace king, I suspect he would have done this much quicker than he did. River is another king, so looking even safer at this point. Second board comes out, all lower cards than my pocket queens, and just like that, he mucks his hand, and we are suddenly up around $50,000 or $75,000. Not bad after being stuck a bunch early on. And with that, we arrive at the hand of the night. In this one, Double M opens for $1,000. A couple of players make the call, and then Yang re-raises on the button to $6,000 with kings. I am looking down in the straddle at pocket aces. Obviously going to be re-raising, so I make it $16,000 to go, trying to weed out the field and continue heads up with just Yang. But much to my surprise, Double M now calls the additional $15,000 on my left. Han and Dario get out of the way, and action gets back to Yang. I'm fully expecting him to just call at this point, and we are going to go three ways with aces out of position, which might be a little bit daunting, but given all this pre-flop action, I'm not too worried about it. Just going to look for a safe flop and continue to put money in. But that's not what ends up happening. Yang instead decides to raise again to $55,000. I once again check my cards. I can't really believe what's going on at this point. I've had a couple of drinks as well, so this all feels kind of surreal in the moment. But I mean, what am I going to do, right? I've got pocket aces. The thing is, I don't really want to re-raise again because I feel like if I do that, it's really just going to be aces and that's it. Whereas if I just call, perhaps I give Double M a chance to enter the pot and I keep my hand just a teeny bit disguised. So that's what I decide to do. I call. Now it's back to Double M, and he decides to raise all in for $259,000. At this point, I am in just complete, utter disbelief at what is going on. Action gets back to Yang, who is weighing his options, and at this point, Double M is all in. I know I have aces, so I've got him in terrible shape, most likely. I turn to him and I let him know that I've got aces, so that he doesn't have to wait until Yang calls or makes any sort of decision to find out the bad news. And of course, looking back, I probably shouldn't have done that since there was still action pending. In the moment, I was just trying to be friendly, let him know that, hey man, I've got aces. But of course, like I said, probably not the best idea. Not really a huge deal, I think, but I guess that's debatable. Either way, Yang thinks it over for a while and decides he is not folding his pocket kings pre-flop. He also puts in the money And now it's back to me. Of course, 2 all-ins ahead of me. I've got aces. This is a no-brainer call. I put in the money, and just like that, I am playing the biggest pot of my entire life at $788,400. Pocket aces versus kings versus kings. To say that this is the stuff dreams are made of, at least in the poker sense, would be an understatement. Obviously, a situation like this almost never happens, and when it does happen, it's usually at your local 1-3 game. So the fact that it's happening in perhaps the biggest game I've ever played is, of course, something I'll never forget. A very, very special hand in my heart. And this was just a crazy moment for me, and I think for everyone at the table, because a cooler like this doesn't happen very often at all. We run it twice and end up holding both boards. And yeah, there was just this eerie silence at the table for a few minutes following this hand, which of course I completely understand. I wasn't really sure what to say myself, but it all happened so fast, and just like that, we end up winning $525,000 in a single hand of Texas Hold'em. Not something you say every day or every year or every decade for that matter, but I'm just happy to be on the fortunate end of this massive cooler, and of course it goes without saying that this hand attributed to the biggest win I've ever had playing poker. And of course, shortly after this, the stream ended up breaking. So, as always, thank you guys for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the hands. Right, so as you guys saw, that went particularly well for me. My favorite part was probably when I had aces and 2 other people had kings. I think I did a really good job there of getting dealt those cards. A lot of talent involved. Obviously joking, but either way I'll take it, because even though it was extremely lucky, no doubt about that, I think that, you know, I did put in some work to eventually get into a position where that was possible. So, I don't know, a little bit of credit is all I'm giving myself, which I think is fair. Anyway, I ended up winning around $500,000 on Friday, ended up losing some amount on Wednesday. Despite winning on stream, I lost some big pot after the stream. So yeah, in total, these are the total hours. This is the total result across both days. Obviously, very, very happy with it. And I am officially on the sickest heater of my life and the biggest upswing of my life as well. We'll see what happens next. I think I'm due to run bad and give some back, but if that doesn't happen, I'm more than okay with it. Anyway, as always, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for being a part of the journey. It's crazy how far things have come in the last few years. And here's to hoping that it just keeps going. All right, thanks for the support. See you guys next time. Good luck at the tables. Peace.